Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar comic review. This is going to be my review for the Imbalance Omnibus edition. So this is finally out. This is the last of the three-part comic trilogies to get a Omnibus edition release. So we now have all 6 Avatar comics in Omnibus format and the 2 Korra comics in Omnibus format as well. So, there's a few things to cover here. As ever, I'll leave some discussions about Imbalance itself as a book towards the end. Most of this review is going to be about just the edition and comparing different editions, because I have discussed Imbalance obviously when it actually came out, which was quite a few years ago at this point. So straight away, what is an omnibus edition? Most people are familiar with Imbalance as a comic. It is the 6th of 6 Avatar comic trilogy, so this is the one that takes place at the end. For anyone wondering, the order is The Promise, The Search, The Rift, Smoke and Shadow, North and South, and then Imbalance. So Imbalance was, of course, where we did switch creative teams from going from Team Gurihuru being our artist to Peter Wortman being our artist here, and then Jean Yang as the writer to Faith Erin Hicks being the writer here. This was the only trilogy that this creative team did before they basically swapped over to do the one-shot comics, Katara and the Pirate Silver, Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy, Suki Alone, the upcoming Azula in the Spirit Temple, and the also upcoming after that, the Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer. And we assume there'll be another one as well. So, the omnibus format, very simply, is just a 3-in-1. It has Imbalance Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 all together in the same book, in the same sort of size format this way, but obviously it is a bit of a thicker book here because it is 3 books in one. It's over 200 pages because it has 3 72-page stories in it. The simple way to put it is, realistically, it is just your other option for a full collected edition of Imbalance. So your choice effectively is, do you want to get the big hardcover Imbalance library edition, or do you want to get the kind of same size as the individual parts, which I'll show off in a second, omnibus 3-in-1, because for the most part the content is very, very similar, and I'll show off those nuances in just a second. But otherwise, the other format, of course, is the initial parts. So you can see here Imbalance Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. This is how the books were initially released, and the idea is that together, these 3 books are, in essence, what the Omnibus Edition is. It's just, obviously, you have one cover here, you have 3 separate books here. But I think these days, unless you are a hardcore collector who just wants every edition of all the books, you probably don't need to worry about the individual parts. I think digitally you probably have to get individual parts, but it's entirely up to you. But yeah, in terms of a buying decision, your choice is this. Do you pay the basically $25? It was €25 for me in my local comic book store today. Or do you pay the, what is this on the back here, the $40 for this? It's entirely up to you. Because, if you are more of you care about your collection, you might want the big hardcover edition because it's a very nice hardcover. Dark Horse always do nice hardcover books. But if you just want a physical copy of the book, this is the kind of cheap and very easily readable option. That also will look nice on your shelf as well, as we'll get into in just a second. But that's effectively the whole idea. The part of the reason I immediately throw the kind of individual parts kind of away here as a thing to get is because there's no extras in those books. It's just the comic, that's all you get. Whereas both collected editions do have some extras in it. Now, there is one exclusive extra that is in the library edition that is not in the omnibus edition, and I'll show that off in a second. What is similar across both of them is, obviously I'll show it off here in the library edition first, because this was released first. There are concept art pages right at the back. So when the story comes to an end, you do get some concept art pages here at the back as you go through character designs for characters and so on. Pretty nice. A bunch of pages of that concept art at the back. The Omnibus edition has that stuff. So if we go to the back of the Omnibus edition, the new book, we have the same thing. And all the images are here. The difference, and they've done this in a few of these, is just that they've taken the amount of pages it takes to cover all of those pieces of art and kind of compressed it a little bit. So instead of getting like individual pages to show off certain things, they've actually just put a bunch of the images together, which is a good page to show it off with. Yeah, probably this one here. So you can see here just some of the random kind of Bender kind of gang members effectively here. You can see here, you know, just a couple of sketches over the course of 2 full giant pages. Whereas in the Omnibus edition, these are kind of featured on just 1 page there. So you can see there, that was a full page in the other book. That was a full page in the other book. But instead it's just covered here on 1 page. And it's the same with like the Li Ling thing. They just edit a few of them together here. But you don't miss any content. It's just how it's sort of presented overall. What the Omnibus edition doesn't have, though, because as you can see here, if you look at the pages here, and nothing on the edges, of course. Just standard comic, of course. But if you do the same thing with the library edition, you can see there's spaces on the edge. Now, a lot of these will be blank, but some of them, as you can see here, have some text on it. These are the annotations from the creative team. So there's Peter Wortman here, Faith Erin Hicks here, and they just give little bits of commentary as you go through the book. Now, ultimately, my thoughts on the annotations are that to put them on every single page of the book, like to put these giant borders on every single page of the book, and then to literally have most of those pages be blank with no commentary, to me it's not quite worth it. I don't think anything that they say is so important that you need to have them. They're fun little things to look at when you actually do see them, but a lot of the times they are very kind of inane. They're just like, this is what happens. This is the obvious reference that is clearly visible on the page that, yes, we can confirm is what we were going for and stuff like that. And it's just like, yeah, look, this commentary here for this page is just like Faith Erin Hicks saying, Toph's little smirk here is so delightful. She knows she's got Ya Ling right where she wants her. And it's like, I got that from the page. And it's just like that. It's not as in-depth as you would want. If the page, nearly all the pages were used, then perhaps I think it would be more of a kind of notable kind of bonus. As it is, it's just like, yeah, there's a couple of interesting things throughout it, but literally, I think it's only on about like 50 out of 200 pages, so less than a quarter of the pages, and then that's including even little tiny 1-line things, and there's very few times when there's actually like a full you know, descriptive piece of text kind of actually given to you. So that is that whole thing. Then we pretty much just kind of have to wrap up the kind of focus on the format with the idea of that it is an Avatar Omnibus edition. And let's take a look at what they did with the previous Omnibus editions here. So let me just bring all these in here. So we have the previous 5 here. So of course we had the Promise Omnibus, we have the Search Omnibus, the Rift Omnibus, Smoke and Shadow Omnibus, and then the North and South Omnibus here. So you can see here, thematically what they did with these, the Team Gurihuru books, was that they had Team Gurihuru do new covers with the kind of nice white plain background with a few key characters on the front of each. Now straight away you can see that with the Imbalance one, the Imbalance Omnibus, they broke that. No white background. In my mind, what I would have preferred, given that they were doing the Omnibus, is literally just have Peter Wortman do this style. White background, the key characters that are in Imbalance, in Peter Wortman's style, just done like this, kind of, you know, edited on top of each other, one in focus, the other characters faded into the background. Just keep the style of cover the same. I just think it would have been a nice little thing to do to add to the overall set, and it feels weird that they just seemingly ignored it overall. Now, one thing everyone has noted, of course, with the Omnibus editions is when you stack them together side by side, the spines of all the books together make an image. Now, it is the North and South Library Edition image, but it's still a very cool thing to see on your shelf, to have it there like that. And the question was obviously like, the image seems pretty complete overall. Like, it's obviously very squashed together there to cover just 5 books. Is there any chance they do anything with the Imbalance Omnibus? And they actually did. This was a kind of surprise to me when I saw this in the store there, when I got it. There are actually little bits of the spine image there. So, if we add this to the set, you can see it does actually work. So it is actually a 6-book kind of strong situation here. Now, obviously, it's much harder to kind of hold all these books together like perfectly for the camera, but it does go together like pretty nicely. It's hard to keep it fully together, but yeah, it works pretty well. It's just the edge of Aang's cape, of course, tiny bit of Sokka's elbow, and a bit of Zuko's fire and his fist. But otherwise, like, it does actually work kind of nicely. It does kind of leave the front of the image here with the promise, leaving a little bit left out, and you kind of wonder like, what are they going to put something up there at the front? What way would they even go about doing that? Because it's kind of notable that obviously the comics after Imbalance and Runes of the Empire transitioned to doing one-shot comics. Though it's a bit unclear about what the situation is with the upcoming Korra comic. That might be a trilogy rather than a trilogy of one-shots, but we'll see what happens there. But Avatar is in one-shots, and it's notable that Suki alone, Toph Beifong's Metal Blending Academy, Katara the Pirate Silver, they didn't ever collect that in a hardcover or an omnibus. Instead, they just did a 3-in-1 kind of box set, but it's the same books. Kind of cool, different thing, but like very different than what they've done before. So will we see a Team Avatar Treasury kind of omnibus edition, maybe to just slot in here at the front? Because all 3... Actually, no, it's not the case, is it? Because Toph Beifong's Metal Blending Academy is set after some of the comics. But, you know, I think it would be a reasonable one to maybe do at the front here, if you absolutely are set on the spine image being, you know, super more complete. Because you can see here, there's clearly like a bit of like Katara's fist, the side of Toph's body, the other bit of Aang's cloak. Probably could do with being there, but it's kind of hard to justify that because we are clearly in the middle of another one-shot trilogy, and so where does that one go? Like, does one go at the front and then the other one just goes on the side here? It feels like for the most part this is kind of where we're at, but overall, like, I like that they just did it, because I don't think anyone was really expecting that Imbalance would just kind of add that little bit in there. Now, I probably should address this just for people who are focused on the spine image. I did a separate video on this when it was more a specific topic, but I see it every so often when I bring up like different editions of comics, and people mention with the omnibus editions that like, oh, it's unfortunate that the whole spine image was ruined because you know, they messed up the printing of one of the books. And now what people are talking about basically is the Rift. I actually have the 2 different versions here to show you. The Rift Omnibus, when they first released it, was this really thick, like you can see here, it's like twice as thick, the kind of binding on it, and so you can see it shows much more of the spine image than it was really meant to. And so if you had a first edition copy of the Rift Omnibus and you put it into your spine image set, it just completely ruined the image, because Smoke and Shadow came out and it was printed normally, and there was a duplicate on part of the image. Now, if you were paying attention to the specifics here, they did later re-release the Rift. Basically, this from the second printing onwards, the Rift is just the same size as all the other ones. So it is one of those things where, like, if you want the spine image to look kind of perfect, you do need to keep an eye out for books where obviously you can see a copy of the Rift that is the exact same size as all of the other ones. So you can see here, like, looking at the whole spine image together, none of the books stand out as being thicker than the other because they all effectively have the exact same page count. Whereas the thick Rift still has the same page count. It was just not bound as tightly as the other ones. So it was a pretty big error overall. But yeah, it's just one of those things where if you're ordering online, it's very difficult to get a hold to figure out what the print edition is and stuff like that. One thing to look for, though, just for anyone wondering about print editions of books, if you open up like it to, what is this? The first page, basically, interior page. Look at the numbers down there above printed. So you can see here it has 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And then you can see there it's like 1 and then the 2 is on the end. The fact that there is a 1 there tells you that this is a first edition printing of this book. So if I look at my other copy of The Rift, wherever it is, here, this one, you'll see the 1 is actually missing. So you can see there, it is 3, 5, and then 2 is on the end. So because 2 is the lowest number, this is the second print run of this book. And this is the corrected copy. So it gives you an idea to look for where, like, if there's only one copy on the shelf, you can tell what it is. If it's among other books, you can obviously tell just by how thick the book is. But that is something if you want to have like the perfect omnibus edition set, because I know that was a major problem with the Rift, is that a lot of people have a bit of a messed up collection, but it has been corrected, unfortunately, though, you know, it's not easy for people to necessarily fully correct it. So that out of the way, some final thoughts on just Imbalance, because I guess I haven't talked about it in a while. It was a very interesting book because obviously it was the first time with a new creative team. It was fascinating because obviously it's about Cranefish Town, which is basically the place that eventually directly becomes Republic City. So it felt like we were finally beginning to, we were already bridging the gap between Avatar and Korra, but this is what felt like we are really bridging the gap now, because this is the actual place that will become Republic City. It is about the Bender versus non-Bender conflict, and in a way, how it's always kind of been there in this city as the nations begin to come together. What ended up happening, though, at least for me, when the book came out, is like, it was very good. Like, all 6 Avatar comic trilogies are good. I personally found it to be probably the weakest of the 6. And I think part of that was just that it was what felt like the very first step of likely many to get us to Korra. That this was not really just a book that, like, on its own told necessarily a complete, like, full story. It resolves what it's kind of doing in a way, but it's very open and immediately needs follow-up. And it links into the way I definitely look back on a lot of the comics right now, which is that the first group of 3 comics, so The Promise, The Search, The Rift, feel very, like, kind of self-contained to a certain extent, in that they have their plot, and yes, there are continuations in a way, like, from them, but they're very much just like, that works on its own as a book and did what it needed to do. The Promise does that, the Search does that, and the Rift does that. The 4, 5, and 6, so Smoke and Shadow, North and South, and Imbalance, all feel like comic trilogies that needed to be followed up with, like, a sequel as soon as possible. In that Smoke and Shadow, we needed to come back to, like, Mei and Zuko's relationship, what's going on there. We need to come back to Azula, what's happening with Azula next. And it's crazy that it has taken, say, with Smoke and Shadow, until basically 2 months from now, when we will finally get the full release of Azula in the Spirit Temple. I've read it already. I have an early review up on my channel if you want to check it out. It's a good book, but, like, it's, you know, it took like 7 years for that to happen. North and South, also very good book, but again, you would like to see some sort of a follow-up about, like, you know, Hakoda and Melina, Katara's relationship with Melina, how she feels about where the South is kind of going forward, maybe give Sokka a little bit more of a chance to shine, show more of the South joining kind of world politics, and some of those elements that were set up in the book, like, they need to be followed up. It works well as a book on its own, but, like, there's a clear sense where, like, we needed to come back to this. And then, to me, Imbalance especially needed some direct follow-up, but it was followed up by basically the announcement, we are no longer doing these 3-part comic series that are expanding the franchise. Instead, basically a decision made by Mike and Brian over top of everyone. You're doing more sandbox style stories, and that's where the comics have been since basically the release of Imbalance / Runes of the Empire on the Korra side of things, is that we've been getting one-shot stories, basically large short stories, and then just short story collections. It's been a while since a very, very significant comic. Azula in the Spirit Temple sort of felt like that, but then the announcement that the next one is like Iroh in June is a little bit of a weird one, but could be interesting. And then we're still waiting to see what the Korra comic announcement is, and we'll be, I guess, finding out about that in a month and a bit, probably at New York Comic Con. So hopefully that delivers and we finally know what's going on with Korra comics. But that basically has been it for Imbalance. It's, again, I think reflecting back on a bunch of years of, short story style content, Imbalance still holds up quite well as one of those initial 6 kind of comic trilogies. It's one of the ones where, like, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do, like, when we jump ahead to, like, the 2025 Avatar Studios Avatar movie, about like how much maybe stuff from this kind of relates to it. But there's going to be quite a few years in between. There's still going to be a gap in a way, which is kind of weird that like they stopped here. Like this could have done with a little bit more. But finally, it seems like for the most part, Dark Horse are now out of reprints. There's not really much else for them to reprint or do as like a new edition of a book. Some of the short story collection stuff, perhaps they could release in some sort of an omnibus style format, but we have no announcements about that right now. So great to finally have, all 8 so far comic trilogies in omnibus format. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the Imbalance Omnibus edition and everything I talked about here. Where do you think the comics are going to go from here now that the opportunity for a lot of these extra reprints stuff is kind of gone for them? But yes, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.